Hi there. Tonight's story isn't about heroes winning or great battles. It's about what happens when people go too far and how the gods reacted. These are the stories the ancient Greeks told about punishment. Not just any punishment, but the kind only gods could come up with. You'll hear stories of people who lied, cheated, or were simply too proud. And somewhere high above, a god was always watching, holding a lightning bolt and remembering everything. If stories like these help you relax, feel free to like the video and subscribe, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? It's comforting to know other people are falling asleep to the same stories. So, take a deep breath. Let your room fall quiet. Let your mind settle. We're about to walk into the world of myths through stone, thunder, and tales that are older than history. Now, this story doesn't begin with a punishment. It starts with the gods themselves. Because to understand why they punished people, you have to understand what kind of gods they were. The gods of Olympus were not always kind or wise. They had all the emotions people do: jealousy, anger, pride, and stubbornness. They weren't perfect. They argued, they cheated, they picked favorites. One day, they might give you beauty or wealth. The next day, they might turn you into a frog just because they felt like it. Zeus, the king of the gods, was famous for throwing thunderbolts and also for falling in love with many people who weren't his wife. He ruled with a big ego. If anyone disrespected him or made him look foolish, that person would be in big trouble. Then there was Hera, Zeus's wife. She was the goddess of marriage, but most of the time, she was angry because of Zeus's many love affairs. She didn't take it out on him. She punished the women he loved and their children instead. Athena, the goddess of wisdom, could be calm and smart one day, and then furious the next. One time, a woman tried to challenge her in weaving, and Athena turned her into a spider forever. The gods didn't punish people to teach them a lesson. They punished people when they felt insulted. It wasn't always about doing something bad. It was about being too proud. In Greek stories, that's called hubris. It means thinking you're better than you really are, especially better than the gods. That was the biggest mistake a person could make. Not being evil, but thinking they were too important. And once someone made that mistake, the punishment would last forever. Take the story of Prometheus, for example. He was a titan, one of the older gods, but he wasn't mean or violent. He was smart. He helped Zeus win a great war, but later, he started to care about humans. Back then, humans didn't know much. They didn't even have fire. Zeus didn't want humans to learn or grow. He liked them weak and quiet. But Prometheus disagreed. He gave fire to humans, and everything changed. They could cook, stay warm, make tools. It was the start of civilization. Zeus was furious. He didn't just get angry. He planned a punishment that would last forever. He had Prometheus chained to a mountain. Every day, an eagle came and ate his liver. At night, the liver grew back, and in the morning, the eagle returned, day after day, forever. Prometheus never gave up, never said sorry. He stayed strong. That's why some people later saw him as a hero, someone who stood up to unfair power. Then there was Sisyphus. He was clever, too clever. He tricked the gods. He even tricked death twice. But in the end, they caught him and his punishment: to roll a heavy rock up a hill forever. Every time he got close to the top, it would roll down again. No fire, no pain, just never-ending work. No success, no finish line, just struggle without purpose. That was the punishment. And somehow it was worse. Another sad story is about Tantalus. He was a mortal king, and the gods liked him. He even got invited to eat with them. But he made a horrible mistake. He served them stew, made from his own son, just to see if they were truly all-knowing. The gods were disgusted. They brought the sun back to life, and they punished Tantalus in a special way. He was put in a pool of water with fruit hanging above him. But whenever he tried to drink or eat, the water moved away. The fruit swayed out of reach forever. That's where we get the word tantalize. It means to tease someone with something they want but can't have. Another story is about a queen named Niobe. She had many children and felt proud, too proud. She looked at the goddess Leto, who had only 2 children, and said, "Why worship her when I have so many?" That offended the gods. Leto's children, Apollo and Artemis, came down and killed all of Niobe's children. Some stories say 1 or 2 survived, but most were gone. Niobe fled and begged the gods to end her pain. They turned her into stone. Her statue still weeps on a mountainside. She wasn't punished with fire or monsters. She was punished with memory and grief. And then there's Actaeon, a hunter who made a terrible mistake. He walked into a quiet forest pool where the goddess Artemis was bathing. He didn't speak. He didn't mean to look, but he saw her, and that was enough. She splashed him with water, and he turned into a deer. His own hunting dogs, not recognizing him, chased him down and tore him apart. The gods don't forgive accidents. Arachne was just a girl, a weaver with incredible skill. People said maybe she was taught by Athena, but Arachne said, "No, I'm better than Athena." So the goddess came down, disguised as an old woman, and offered a chance to take it back. Arachne didn't. She doubled down. They had a weaving contest. Athena wove scenes showing the power of the gods. Arachne wove scenes showing the gods being cruel and unfair. Her work was perfect and honest. Athena was angry, not because of the skill, but because of the truth. She tore the tapestry. Arachne was so ashamed, she tried to take her own life. Athena stopped her, but turned her into a spider, doomed to weave forever in the shadows. Even Pentheus, a young king who didn't believe in Dionysus, god of wine and chaos, learned the hard way. He mocked the god, arrested his followers. So Dionysus tricked him. The god dressed Pentheus as a woman and lured him into the woods. There, the wild women of the gods' cult saw him, thought he was a beast, and tore him apart. His own mother led the attack, and only afterward realized what she had done. These stories might seem cruel, but to the Greeks, they were more than tales. They were warnings. Don't be too proud. Don't forget your place. Don't challenge the gods. These myths weren't about justice. They were about power, and what happens when you don't respect it. Yet, even in their cruelty, the gods left symbols. Fire, rocks, water, thread. Everything meant something. The punishments weren't just painful. They were poetic. They told a story. And now, as you lie in your bed, maybe you feel the quiet meaning too. The gods aren't watching tonight. The boulder has rolled down. The eagle has flown away. The loom is silent. The forest is still. And you are free to rest. Let your thoughts drift through myth and marble, thunder and stillness. Let sleep come gently, like the fading echoes of a story long remembered. Sleep well. Actaeon's story was one of the quietest tragedies, not loud, not full of rage, just a moment of misstep, a glance that could not be undone, a peaceful walk through the forest that ended with a chase and a death. His own dogs did not recognize him. The animals he had raised from puppies, trained with love and care, turned on him when he no longer looked like himself. That's the kind of punishment the gods gave, not because he meant harm, but because he saw something sacred without permission. And so the hunter became the hunted, the man became the deer. The familiar forest became unfamiliar, and silence returned. The Greeks understood that stories didn't need to be fair to feel meaningful. They needed to teach, and they needed to be remembered. Now, let's travel to another thread in this ancient tapestry, the tale of Arachne. Arachne was not a princess. She was not a goddess or the daughter of one. She was a regular girl. She came from a family of cloth makers. Her father dyed the wool, soaking it in deep purple from sea snails. Her mother spun it into yarn, and Arachne she wove. She wove better than anyone else in her town, perhaps better than anyone in the world. People came from other cities to see her work. Birds, stitched into her cloth, looked ready to fly away. Trees waved in the wind. Horses seemed to gallop across her fabric. Her fingers moved like they were born for this. Her talent was something rare and beautiful, and people began to whisper. She must have been taught by Athena, the goddess of crafts and wisdom herself. But Arachne didn't like that idea. She said, very simply, "No, I taught myself. I am better than Athena." And those words, they were enough. Athena heard, and the goddess did not laugh. She didn't throw thunder or shake the earth. She came down quietly, dressed as an old woman, and gave Arachne a chance. She said, "Be humble. Thank the gods for your talent. Apologize, and all will be well." But Arachne shook her head. She said, "No, I'm the best weaver, better than any god. Let Athena prove she's better than me." So the goddess dropped her disguise. The old woman faded away, and Athena stood there, tall, glowing, and silent. And without another word, the contest began. 2 looms, 2 sets of thread, 1 mortal girl, 1 goddess. Athena worked quickly. Her tapestry showed scenes of Olympus, beautiful, proud, and full of glory. At the corners, she stitched warnings. Mortals punished for pride, mortals who thought they were clever. It was a warning in cloth. Then Arachne began. Her tapestry didn't show glory. It showed the gods making mistakes. It showed Zeus tricking women, Poseidon chasing them, Apollo leaving them. All the times the gods had acted unfairly, selfishly. But her work was flawless. Even Athena couldn't deny it. The weaving was perfect, and that was the problem. Athena stood up, looked at the tapestry, and tore it apart. She didn't yell, she didn't curse, she simply destroyed what had been made. Arachne, heartbroken, ran from the room and, in some versions, tried to end her life. But Athena stopped her. She touched the girl and changed her. Arachne's fingers became legs. Her body shrank. Her eyes grew wide, and she became the first spider, doomed to spin forever. No longer praised, no longer seen, but still weaving, always weaving. That was her punishment, not pain, but transformation. She wasn't killed, she was made into something smaller, something forgotten, something that people would fear or swat away. But even now, spiders still spin. Their silk glows in the morning light. It clings to windows and corners. It waits quietly in the dark. Arachne's work continues, even if no one sees it. That's the kind of punishment the gods gave. Not just suffering, but silence. Not death, but being changed into something less. And yet, even in this, there is something powerful. A spider does not boast, a spider does not sing, but a spider still weaves. Now, let's follow the thread further. To the story of Pentheus. Pentheus was a king, young, proud, and serious. He ruled Thebes, a city always full of trouble. His grandfather Cadmus had seen monsters and curses. Pentheus, by contrast, believed in order, in rules, in reason. He did not like wild things, and he especially disliked one god, Dionysus, the god of wine, dance, chaos, and celebration. Dionysus was everything Pentheus feared: wild, unpredictable, feminine, strange. And when word came that the god had returned, spreading his cult through the hills, Pentheus made a choice. He banned it. He tore down the vineyards, sent soldiers to arrest the dancing women. He wanted control. But Dionysus didn't fight back. He arrived in disguise, as a gentle stranger, handsome, quiet, and calm. Pentheus arrested him. He mocked him, laughed at his clothes, said, "You're no god. You're just a man pretending." But then strange things happened. The chains fell off by themselves. The torches blew out. The stranger vanished. And still, Pentheus wasn't afraid. He was curious. He wanted to see the women in the hills, to spy on the rituals, to find out what was happening. And the stranger offered a disguise. "Wear this dress," he said. "Put on this wig, this veil. Go into the woods, see for yourself." Pentheus, proud and stubborn, agreed. And up the mountain he went, in women's clothing, guided by a god he didn't recognize. When he reached the clearing, he hid behind a tree and watched. The women, the Bacchae, were dancing, laughing, wild, beautiful, free. And then they saw him. They didn't see a king. They didn't see a man. In their madness, given by Dionysus, they saw a wild beast. And his own mother, Agave, led the charge. She thought he was a lion. She was in a trance, lost in the god's spell. She tore him apart with her bare hands, thinking she was protecting the sacred grove. Only afterward did she see what she had done, and she wept. The punishment had come, not in thunder, not in fire, but in madness, in confusion, in turning pride into tragedy. Dionysus didn't just destroy Pentheus, he unraveled him. He showed that control can become fear, that order without understanding leads to ruin. The gods didn't always want obedience. Sometimes they wanted acceptance. Pentheus could not accept what he didn't understand, and so he was undone by it. Now, let us turn to a different kind of figure. Not a rebel, not a king, but a prophet, Tiresias. Tiresias was not born great. He was not famous as a child, but he noticed things, the way the wind changed, the way birds flew. He listened when others didn't. One day, walking in the woods, he saw two snakes. Some say they were fighting. Others say they were together. He struck them with a stick, and instantly he changed. He became a woman, not just dressed as one. He was transformed completely. He lived as a woman for 7 years. Some say she married. Some say she had a child. Some say she lived alone, but she learned. She saw the world through new eyes. She understood what it meant to be seen differently, to be treated differently, to be heard or not heard. Then, one day, she returned to that same spot and saw snakes again. This time, she let them be, or gently separated them. And again, she changed. She became a man once more. He remembered both lives, and that knowledge stayed with him. Later, the gods argued. Zeus and Hera, who feels more pleasure in love, they wondered. Zeus said women, Hera said men, and they turned to Tiresias for an answer. He said, calmly, of 10 parts, women feel 9. Zeus smiled. Hera did not, and in anger she struck him blind. But Zeus, feeling sorry, gave him a gift, sight of a different kind, the ability to see the future. Tiresias became a prophet, quiet, wise, always telling the truth, even when no one wanted to hear it. He warned kings, he guided heroes, he saw clearly, even in darkness. And that was his punishment and his gift, not blindness, but being ignored, being right, too late. He walks through many stories, staff in hand, gently tapping the ground, not feared, not loved, just remembered. And now, as the night grows deeper, let your thoughts slow. The gods are quiet, and we, too, can rest. No punishments, no warnings, just stillness. Let the silence wrap around you. Let the stories fade to shadows and sleep. Greek mythology doesn't have saints. It doesn't tell stories of perfect people who live kind lives and are rewarded in the end. It doesn't promise peace or happy endings or justice in the way modern stories sometimes try to do. What it offers instead are people, mortals, who are always dancing on the edge, not because they are bad, but because they are human, and gods who are not always fair, but always watching. These myths are not about teaching us how to be good. They are about showing us what happens when people forget where they stand in the order of the world. They are not lessons in goodness. They are warnings about balance, how easy it is to disturb it, and how dangerous it is to be noticed by a god. The Greeks had a word for it, hubris. It didn't mean evil. It meant going too far, speaking too loudly, boasting too much, thinking you were equal to a god, or more clever than fate. And when someone did that, when a mortal stepped too far outside their place, the gods would answer, not with mercy, but with drama. Prometheus gave fire to mankind, a small act of kindness, a great act of rebellion. And so he was chained to a cliff for eternity, with an eagle eating his liver day after day. And still he endured. His suffering became a symbol, his defiance a spark that never went out. Sisyphus tricked the gods. He outwitted death. He ran circles around rules and fairness. And for that, he was given a rock, one that would never stay where he put it. A task with no end, a struggle without victory, a sentence not of pain, but of frustration. Tantalus wanted to test the gods. He served them a stew made from his sun, a challenge, a cruel experiment, and the punishment. Hunger, thirst, a fruit always just out of reach, a pool that drained the moment his lips touched it. Forever, almost never enough. Niobe lost everything, not because she hated the gods, but because she spoke out of pride. She boasted about her children, compared herself to a goddess, and the cost was grief. Slow and heavy, her children gone, her body turned to stone. And from the cliff where she stood, her tears still fall, even now. Actaeon stumbled where he should not have. He saw something sacred. He saw a goddess bathing. He didn't speak. He didn't attack, but he looked, and that was enough. For that, he was changed into a deer, and his own dogs, creatures he had raised, tore him apart. Arachne wove beauty into cloth. She told truths, too much truth, perhaps. Her work was perfect, and in its perfection, it revealed the flaws of the gods. And so, she was not killed. She was turned into a spider, still weaving, always weaving, but never again heard, never again seen as a person. Pentheus tried to bring order. He feared chaos. He mocked a god, Dionysus, who represents the wild parts of ourselves. And so he was drawn into the woods, dressed in a disguise, and torn apart by his own mother, not because he was cruel, but because he refused to understand. Tiresias did not ask for his fate. He struck a pair of snakes and became a woman. He lived that way for years, learned, changed, then returned to being a man. And when the gods asked him a question, he answered truthfully. And for that, he was blinded and made into a prophet. He would see more than anyone else, but always too late. One after another, the stories continue. Different names, different places, but always the same pattern. A small step too far. A mistake sometimes made in pride, sometimes in love, sometimes in simple curiosity, and then the fall. The gods didn't punish because they were kind. They punished because they could, because they wanted to be remembered, because they wanted respect, even if they did not always deserve it. And so punishment in Greek myth became its own kind of story, a story within a story, a way of teaching people how to survive, a way of reminding mortals that the world was not theirs to control. But here is the strange thing. In all this tragedy, in all this suffering, there is something beautiful, not fair, not gentle, but poetic. Each punishment fits the crime, not logically, but symbolically. Prometheus gave fire, and his own body burns every day. Sisyphus tricked death, and is now trapped in a task that never ends. Tantalus served forbidden food, and now can never eat or drink again. Niobe bragged about her children, and now stands, frozen in grief, a mother of none. Actaeon saw too much, and became the hunted. Arachne wove truth, and now weaves in shadows. Pentheus mocked the wild, and was lost in it. Tiresias spoke a truth to Sharp, and was left in darkness, seeing more than anyone else. Each story ends in silence, in stone, in shadow, in repetition, in blindness, and still we remember them. Still we tell these stories. Still we whisper their names. Prometheus, Sisyphus, Tantalus, Niobe, Actaeon, Arachne, Pentheus, Tiresias, not heroes, not villains, just people. And maybe that's why these stories still feel close, even thousands of years later, because they remind us what it means to be human, to want, to reach, to stumble, to be punished, to survive. In a world where the gods could destroy you for a single mistake, being remembered was its own kind of victory. And now, as your breathing slows and the stories fade to soft echoes, perhaps you feel something too. Not fear, not sorrow, but understanding that we are all small, that life is a balance, that pride can be quiet and punishment can be gentle, that sometimes the biggest danger is not being evil, but being noticed, and that, at the end of it all, sleep still comes, even in a world ruled by thunder and stones, even with gods who strike and transform and blind. Even in the midst of grief and shame, sleep comes. You do not have to fight anymore. You do not have to run. You are not being watched. You are not being punished. You are safe. Let the myths fall away now. Let the gods grow distant. Let the mountain grow still. Let the loom stop turning. Let the river grow calm, and let your eyes close. You have wandered through stories older than history. You have stood beside mortals who lost everything, and still you are here. You are warm. You are quiet. You are at peace. sleep now. The gods have done enough. Would you like me to continue by expanding this story further, adding new myths and figures from Greek mythology, rewritten in this same slow, poetic, and simple style to reach your 200,000-word goal? I can add stories like Orpheus and Eurydice, Medusa, Pandora, the house of Atreus Oedipus, the Minotaur, and Theseus, the Trojan War, slow and reflective, and more. In the quiet world of Greek myth, where punishment is common and pride is punished swiftly, there is another kind of story, a love story, not one with a happy ending, but a softer tale, full of music and shadows and silence. It begins with a man named Orpheus. He was not a warrior, he was not a king, he was not the son of Zeus or Poseidon. Orpheus was something different, a poet, a singer, a musician so gifted that when he played, the world paused to listen. The trees leaned closer, the rivers slowed, even wild beasts sat still. His music wasn't loud, it was soft, slow, full of longing. His lyre, a small harp, spoke with a voice that touched things words could not, and Orpheus fell in love. Her name was Eurydice, a quiet woman, gentle and graceful. Some say she was a nymph, some say a mortal. But what mattered was their love, deep, soft, and pure. They were married, and for a little while the world seemed kind. But Greek stories rarely stayed gentle for long. Eurydice was walking in the grass, perhaps on her wedding day, perhaps soon after. A snake, silent, hidden, struck her foot. She fell, and she died. No storm, no punishment, just silence. Orpheus's world shattered, but he did not rage. He did not curse the gods. He did not raise a sword. He picked up his lyre, and he walked. He walked to the underworld, that place beneath the earth where the dead go, a place ruled by Hades, the quiet god of the dead, and his shadowy queen, Persephone. No one walks into the underworld alive, but Orpheus did, and the gates opened for him, not because of who he was, but because of what he carried, his music. He played sad chords, music that melted the cold, that made the ghosts weep, that brought stillness to a place already filled with silence. He reached the throne of Hades and Persephone and did not beg. He sang. He sang of love, of a life shared, of a girl taken too soon, of mornings that no longer came, of a heart broken but still beating. Even the Furies, those terrible goddesses of revenge, wept. And for once, the gods of the underworld showed mercy. "You may take her," said Hades, "back to the world above. But there is one condition." Orpheus listened. "She will follow you," said the god. "But you must not look back, not once, not until you both are in the light." And so Orpheus turned and began the walk back, step by step, music silent now, the air heavy with waiting. He could not hear her footsteps. He could not ask if she was behind him. He could not look. The tunnel stretched on, dark, endless, cold. He walked and walked and walked, and then he saw the light. He stepped out into the daylight, but something inside him, a quiet panic, a whisper of doubt, made him turn. Just before Eurydice had crossed the threshold, just before she stepped into the sun, he looked and she vanished. No scream, no wind, no punishment, just a gentle fading, a presence erased. He had broken the rule, not out of arrogance, not out of pride, out of love, out of fear, out of the desperate, unbearable need to know she was truly there. And so she was gone, again, this time forever. Orpheus tried to return to the underworld, but the doors did not open, not again. And so he wandered, alone, He played no more songs. He sang no more poems. Some say he lived in silence until his death. Others say he sat by a river and watched the water pass. But the story, his story, stayed, not because it ended in joy, but because it showed something deeper, that even in myth, even among gods and monsters, the most powerful force was love. And that love, even when lost, does not disappear. It echoes in music, in memory, in myth. Let your thoughts drift now to a quiet path underground, to the soft sound of footsteps, to the slow rise of light, and then a breath, a turn, a fading, and the music stops. But you are here. You do not have to walk alone. You do not have to look back. You may rest. The story has been told. The silence has returned, and the lyre is still. There once lived a girl named Medusa, whose beauty was so bright it almost hurt to look at her. Her hair flowed like rivers of silk, dark and full of shine. Her eyes glimmered with depth, like the sea under moonlight. And when she walked, it seemed the wind stopped, listening, watching. She was mortal, not a goddess, not divine, but her beauty sang like a hymn, and people turned their heads when she passed. She lived near the great temple of Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, a place of silence and stillness, where prayers were whispered and torches flickered in the night. Medusa, full of laughter and life, walked among the marble walls, her footsteps light against the stone. She loved the temple, not with pride, but with wonder. She felt safe there, as if the goddess herself was watching over her. But one day, that protection broke. There are many versions of what happened next. Some say it was a choice. Others say it was not. But in every story, Poseidon, god of the sea, entered the temple. He was vast, wild, and powerful. And there, within those sacred walls, he claimed Medusa, not in love, but in power. And the temple, once a place of safety, was silent. Athena, cold and distant, saw what had happened. But instead of turning her anger toward Poseidon, her fellow god, she turned it toward Medusa. Perhaps it was because Medusa had drawn attention in a place meant for worship. Perhaps it was because the goddess could not punish a god and so punished the mortal instead. Or perhaps, in that sharp silence, there was something else, a desire to make a lesson. So Medusa was transformed. Her soft hair, once praised, turned into living snakes, hissing and coiling with restless hunger. Her gaze, once gentle, became cursed. Anyone who looked upon her now, even in love or awe, would turn to stone. Her beauty, once admired, became a weapon she could not control, and so she fled. She left the cities, the temples, the people. She wandered into the far wilderness, to cliffs where the wind never stopped, to caves deep in the rocks where even birds did not fly. There she lived alone. No mirrors, no visitors, only silence and the gentle slither of the serpents who now crowned her. The world above whispered her name in fear. They called her monster. They drew pictures of her with sharp teeth and wild eyes. They told stories of men who had sought her and were never seen again. But Medusa did not seek revenge. She did not leave her cave. She did not rage. She stayed where she was, quiet and unseen, a prisoner of a curse she never asked for. And then came Perseus, a young hero, brave, guided by the gods, sent on a mission to bring back Medusa's head. Not her voice, not her story, her head, a trophy to show, a weapon to use. He came with gifts, a mirrored shield, so he would not look directly at her, a sword, bright and clean, winged sandals, to fly above danger, a helmet to turn invisible, tools from Olympus, given by gods who had shaped the story long before Medusa was ever born. Perseus did not speak to her. He did not ask her name. He found her asleep, and while she dreamed, perhaps of the ocean or the temple, or of being seen as herself once more, he raised the blade and took her head. There was no cry, no fight, just silence. It spread like a shadow cast by firelight. Perseus carried her head with pride. It became a weapon used to turn enemies into stone. Even in death, Medusa was feared. Even in death, she was used. But her face, quiet, frozen, told a different story. Not of rage, not of terror, but of a woman who was once whole, once happy, once free, now turned into a symbol she never chose to become. And so the story of Medusa continues, painted on shields, carved into stone, told in whispers. But sometimes, in the gentler tellings, her name is spoken with softness, not as a monster, but as a warning, a reflection of how beauty, once praised, can be punished, of how power, once given, can be turned against its bearer, of how a victim can become a villain in the eyes of those who never knew her story. Now, as you lie still beneath your blanket, your breath slow and steady, you can imagine her, not the snakes, not the stone, but the girl walking beside a temple, smiling in the sun before the world grew quiet. Let her rest now, let her sleep, and you, too, may close your eyes, knowing the truth behind the myth is always quieter than the tale. In the distant past, across the wind-dark sea, there stood the mighty island of Crete, ruled by a powerful king named Minos. His palace was vast and glittering, full of painted walls and twisting corridors. The people feared him and admired him in equal measure. But deep beneath this palace, in the stone roots of the earth, was something the world had never seen before, a creature neither man nor beast, hidden at the center of a great maze. The creature was called the Minotaur, half man, half bull. Born from pride and divine trickery, it had the strength of 10 men and the eyes of a lost child. It lived in the labyrinth, a twisting maze built by the master inventor Daedalus, so complex that no one who entered ever came out. The Minotaur did not leave the maze, but it did not live in peace. It was fed. Once every 9 years, or every 7 in some tellings, King Minos demanded a tribute from Athens, 7 boys and 7 girls, sent by ship, trembling, young, and silent. They would be placed in the labyrinth as an offering, and the Minotaur, forgotten and furious, would find them. This punishment was not random. It was rooted in sorrow. Years before, Minos' son had died in Athens, and so Minos, grieving and angry, placed a curse upon the city. It was not war, it was worse, a slow bleeding of youth, hope, and future. And so Athens sent its children, until one year, when a young prince named Theseus, son of Aegeus, king of Athens, stood and offered himself. He did not weep, he did not beg. He stepped forward and said, "I will go, and I will kill the beast." The people watched him. His father trembled, but Theseus was calm. Before he left, he made a promise. "If I succeed," he told his father, "I will return with white sails on the ship. If I fail, the sails will remain black." The ship departed, and the sea was wide. When he arrived in Crete, Theseus was not alone for long. Someone was watching him, the king's daughter, Ariadne, whose heart beat faster each time he passed. She saw something in him, courage, perhaps, or kindness, and she knew she could not let him walk into the labyrinth without a way out. And so, in the softest part of night, she gave him a gift, a ball of thread. "Unwind it as you go," she whispered, "and follow it back." Theseus took the string, and her hope, and her trust, and at dawn he entered the maze. The air was cool, the walls high and narrow. The stone held old echoes, the path twisted and turned, doubled back and led forward again. Theseus walked, the thread unspooling behind him, every footstep softer than the last. At the center, he found the Minotaur. It did not speak, it did not plead, it charged. They fought in silence, in shadow, in the place where the world does not watch. And Theseus, though young, was strong and clever and patient, with his hands or with a blade. The stories differ. He struck the final blow, and the Minotaur, once feared, was still. There was no roar, no blood-curdling scream, just a quiet exhale, a life born of pain, ended in darkness. Theseus followed the thread back, each step closer to the light, and when he emerged from the maze, Ariadne was waiting, her eyes wide with wonder, her heart heavy with hope. They left Crete together, sailing across the calm sea. She had given up her home, her family, her name, all for him. But the myths are not kind. On the way back to Athens, Theseus left Ariadne on an island, Naxos. Some say he abandoned her in sleep. Others say the gods demanded it. Either way, she woke alone, the waves quiet around her, the sails already shrinking into the horizon. Theseus sailed on, but he forgot one thing: the sails, the black sails, the ones of mourning. They still hung on the ship. And when his father, Aegeus, saw the dark sails from the cliffs of Athens, he believed his son was dead. Grief overtook him, and he threw himself into the sea. That sea now bears his name, the Aegean Sea. And Theseus, young and brave, returned not to celebration, but to a kingdom cloaked in sorrow. He had killed the monster, but the story did not end in victory. It ended with a thread cut too soon. Now, the labyrinth is gone, its stones swallowed by time. The Minotaur sleeps, Ariadne dreams alone. Theseus rules a city that never forgets. And you, quiet beneath your blanket, drift through the gentle folds of myth, your own thoughts slowly unwinding like thread in the dark. Let the maze vanish behind you. Let the light stay ahead and rest. The monster has been faced. The story has been told. You are safe. You may sleep. There was once a kingdom called Thebes, nestled between mountains and built upon stories far older than its walls. It was a place of echoing halls, sacred fires, and whispered omens. And into this city, like a shadow cast long before he ever arrived, came the name of Oedipus, a child of prophecy, born with a fate so terrible that no one dared speak it aloud. From the moment he opened his eyes to the world, the gods had already whispered his future, that he would one day kill his father and marry his mother. A curse not born of cruelty, but of design. A riddle placed by fate itself, silent and watching. When his parents, the king and queen of Thebes, heard the prophecy, they were horrified. They did not cradle their child close. They did not wait for his first words. Instead, they handed him to a servant with shaking hands and told him to take the baby far away, to leave him on a mountain, to let the cold wind end the curse before it began. But the servant could not bring himself to do it. He passed the baby on to another shepherd, and the child was taken across the land to Corinth, to be raised by a different king and queen, who never told him where he truly came from. Oedipus grew strong and clever, He asked questions. He learned quickly. And one day, as a young man, he heard a whisper of prophecy. Curious, he traveled to the oracle at Delphi, the mouth of the gods, hidden in mist and mystery. And there, the same terrible fate was repeated to him, that he would kill his father and marry his mother. He left Delphi shaken, determined to protect those he believed to be his parents. He would never return to Corinth, never see them again. He would run from the curse. He would outrun fate. On the road, in the dust and heat of the sun, Oedipus encountered a stranger, older, proud, with servants who blocked the path. A quarrel began. Anger rose, and before he could stop himself, Oedipus struck. The man fell. The servants fled. And without knowing it, without meaning to, Oedipus had fulfilled the first half of his prophecy. He had killed his father, King Laius of Thebes, on a nameless road, with no idea the blood that now stained his hands. He continued his journey, unaware of the truth, until he reached the gates of Thebes. The city was in crisis. A monster, the Sphinx, with the body of a lion, the wings of an eagle, and the face of a woman, blocked the road and devoured those who could not answer her riddle. Oedipus, bold and thoughtful, stepped forward. The Sphinx asked her question. What walks on 4 legs in the morning, 2 at noon, and 3 in the evening? And he answered, without fear, a man who crawls as a baby, walks as an adult, and uses a cane in old age. The Sphinx shrieked and fell from her perch. Defeated, the city was saved. The people welcomed Oedipus as a hero. They offered him the throne. They gave him the widowed queen, Jocasta, as his wife. They celebrated. And for many years, he ruled Thebes with wisdom. He had children. He built roads. He was loved. The curse seemed forgotten, but the truth, as always, waited. Years passed, and Thebes began to wither. Crops failed. Livestock died. Plague spread. The people turned once more to the oracle, who said the city was cursed because the murderer of King Laius still lived, and lived among them. Oedipus, devoted to justice, vowed to find the killer. He questioned his people. He summoned prophets. He searched for clues, not knowing that every step brought him closer to the edge of a truth he could not bear. At last, the pieces began to fall into place. The old servant returned, the one who had once taken a baby from the queen long ago. The shepherd spoke. The truth unraveled like a tapestry cut loose at the corners. The stranger Oedipus had killed was his father. The woman he loved, the mother of his children, was his mother. The prophecy had come true, not through cruelty, not through pride, but through fate. Silent, patient, complete, Jocasta, when she understood, fell into despair. She fled to her chambers and took her own life, her body found in stillness and shadow. And Oedipus, broken by the truth, shattered not by punishment from the gods, but by the weight of knowing what he had done, took her brooches and blinded himself. He did not want to see the world anymore. He did not want to see the faces of his children, his people, his past. He begged to be exiled, to live in darkness. And so he left. A king no more. A father no more. A man led by his daughter Antigone, step by step, staff in hand, wandering far from the city he had once saved and then cursed. But he did not rage. He did not blame the gods. In his blindness, he found something softer, a kind of peace that he had never known in all his years of running, solving, ruling. And in the silence of the woods, under branches that whispered like old women, he disappeared from history. Some say he died. Others say he vanished, taken by the earth. forgiven by the gods. No monument was raised, only quiet, only wind, and the sound of leaves falling. Now the tale has been told, not of monsters, but of fate, not of heroes, but of understanding. You need not fear prophecy tonight. There is no riddle waiting at your door. There is no curse hidden in your past. There is only this breath, this moment, this stillness. You are safe. Let your mind drift. Let your eyes grow heavy. The roads are quiet. The Sphinx has gone. The gods are watching someone else. And you, dear listener, may rest. One woven by patience, silence, and the quiet strength of waiting. In the chaos of Greek myths filled with war and revenge, there is a still point, like the calm at the center of a storm. Her name is Penelope, and hers is not a tale of conquest, but of holding on, not to a sword, but to hope. While heroes sailed across distant seas and kingdoms rose and fell in fire and fury, on the green island of Ithaca, Penelope sat quietly by the window, her fingers never still. She was the wife of Odysseus, a man known across the world for his cleverness, his wandering, and his long, winding journey home. But Penelope's journey was different. Hers did not cross oceans or battle monsters. It stayed in one place. It waited. For 20 long years, it waited. And this, too, is a kind of courage. When Odysseus left for the war at Troy, he promised he would return. He held her hand, kissed her brow, and boarded the ship. And for the first 10 years, Penelope heard stories, tales of great battles, of wooden horses, and fallen cities. But after Troy was taken, the stories stopped. The sea swallowed the messengers. Rumors drifted like fog. Some said he was dead. Others said he was lost. A few claimed he had chosen never to return. And still, Penelope waited. Ithaca was not a large island, but it had many men, proud, impatient, greedy, who saw in Penelope not a grieving wife, but a throne waiting to be claimed. They came to her hall in groups, dressed in fine robes, offering smiles and promises. They ate her food, they drank her wine, they mocked her hope, and they whispered day after day that Odysseus was gone, that she must choose one of them, that it was time to move on. But Penelope was clever, too. She told them she would choose a husband when she finished weaving a burial shroud for her father-in-law. Every day she sat at her loom, her fingers gliding over the threads, her face calm and patient. And every night, in the soft light of her lamp, she undid the work. She pulled the threads back, quietly, carefully, row by row. Her hands told one story by day and another by night. It was a kind of magic, this weaving, a magic not of spells, but of resistance. And for 3 years it worked. Far from the bustling cities and the thunder of gods, there was once a brilliant man named Daedalus, a craftsman whose mind could shape wood and stone into wonders the world had never seen. His hands were steady, his thoughts sharp. He built palaces that twisted like puzzles, statues that breathed, doors that opened with a whisper. He was not loud or boastful, but the world turned toward his creations like flowers toward the sun. Kings sent for him. Myths followed him, and when he came to Crete, he built something that would outlive even the gods' interest, the labyrinth. A maze of such perfect confusion that no one who entered could ever find their way back. But for all his brilliance, Daedalus was not free. The same King Minos, who had praised his genius, also feared it. And so Daedalus became a prisoner in all but name. The palace walls around him were gilded, but they were still walls. He was not alone in his captivity. His young son, Icarus, stayed by his side. A boy full of light and energy, with eyes that danced and feet that rarely stood still. To Icarus, the palace was not a prison, it was a world. He had never known the outside, never stood at the edge of a shore and felt the horizon call to him. But in Daedalus's eyes, the island grew smaller every day, and he began to dream of escape. He did not look to the ground, where ships might be caught or watched. He looked to the sky, feathers, wax, thread, patience, and the mind of a man who had shaped impossible things. Slowly, secretly, he began to build 2 pairs of wings. Not magical, not divine, just tools, light frames, wide and curved, feathers woven tightly, each one chosen, wax poured warm and smooth to bind them. He made 1 pair for himself, 1 for Icarus, and when they were done, he explained everything to the boy. How to catch the wind, how to ride the air, how to keep balance, but most of all, how not to fly too high. The sun, he said, will melt the wax. And then, just as gently, he warned not to fly too low either, or the waves would pull him under. Stay in the middle, he told his son. That is the safest path. And so, on a quiet morning, with no fanfare or farewell, the 2 stepped onto the roof of the palace. The sky stretched endless above them, soft and open. Daedalus turned to his son, gave 1 last look, not stern, but full of love, and leaped, and Icarus followed. At first, the wind caught them like a song. They rose gently, gliding over rooftops, past towers, above the cliffs. The world below grew smaller. The sea shimmered like silver silk. Icarus laughed, pure and wild. The sound of someone who had never imagined flight could feel like this. He soared, higher, then higher still. Daedalus flew steadily, calmly, his eyes always scanning the distance, the shape of the land ahead. But Icarus felt the sun on his skin, the warmth, the freedom. He forgot the warnings, or perhaps he remembered and no longer cared. The air was soft, the sky endless. He wanted more. For 3 years, she kept them at bay, wrapped in her silence, her dignity, her grief. But nothing stays hidden forever. One night, a servant betrayed her. The suitors stormed into her weaving room and found the half-made cloth, the loosened threads, the truth laid bare, the lie unraveled. And so the pressure returned. Choose, decide, end the story. But she did not break. Even as the suitors filled her home, even as they sat in her halls and wasted her stores, even as they called her foolish for waiting, Penelope stayed still. Her heart, a soft drum that beat only for one name. Her soul, a quiet lighthouse in the dark. And across the sea, Odysseus struggled. 10 years of war, 10 more of wandering, of shipwrecks and gods, of monsters and storms. He was changed, older, weary, his eyes full of distant skies. And yet, through it all, he thought of her, of the loom, of the olive tree bed, of the woman who had held his absence like a vow. At last, he returned, not in glory, not with trumpets, but in disguise, a beggar, bearded and bent, stepping across the threshold of his own home like a shadow, testing the world that had moved on without him. Penelope saw him, but she did not cry out. She did not run to him. She watched, she listened, she waited. She asked a question about the bed they once shared. A bed carved from a living olive tree, built into the roots of their home, immovable, unshakable. No one else could know its secret. And when he answered, she knew. The man before her, aged and worn, was still him. And in that moment, the waiting ended. No feast was held, no crowds gathered, just two people, alone in a room, holding the silence they had carried for 2 decades. They spoke through tears, through hands, through the weight of years. And the loom, for the first time in a long time, was still. Penelope's story is quiet. It does not roar, it does not conquer, but it endures. And endurance, too, is a kind of strength. She did not raise a sword. She did not ride into battle. She simply believed. And in that belief, she held together a kingdom, a family, a story. Let her stillness wash over you now. Let her silence be your own. There are no suitors at your door, no choices to make, no loom to unravel, only breath, only sleep, only the knowledge that, like Odysseus, your journey, no matter how long, how twisted, always ends in home. And home is quiet and safe and warm. Let your limbs grow heavy. Let the waiting pass. Let your thoughts sail gently back, guided by stars, to the soft island of rest. You are here now. He rose and rose and rose until the wax began to weep. First a drop, then another. Feathers, one by one, loosened and fell. And then, like a sigh, the wings collapsed. Icarus did not scream. There was no thunder, just a silence, like a breath held too long. And then the fall, slow, quiet, like a feather drifting back to earth. The sea welcomed him, and then he was gone. Daedalus turned too late. He circled, searched, called his son's name into the wind. But there was no answer. Only waves, only sky, only the hush of a dream ended too soon. He flew on, alone. And when he landed far away on a quiet shore, he wept, not with fury, but with the heavy sorrow of a father who had given his child wings and watched them fail. Now, when the sun rises above the Icarian Sea, the waves still sparkle in memory of the boy who flew too high. The story is told not in anger, but in awe. For what is Icarus, if not a symbol of all of us, of every longing heart that reaches too far, of every bright spirit that wants to touch something more, even if the cost is great. Icarus was not punished, he was not cursed. He simply forgot the weight of the world in the joy of flight. And maybe that too is a kind of beauty. Let your thoughts settle now. Let the sky grow quiet above you. The wings are folded. The feathers are still. You do not need to rise. You do not need to fall. You are here, safe, and the sea is calm. Let your breath drift in and out like the tide. Let the stars watch over you like they once watched him. Sleep now. The sky will wait. Let us now step softly into the quiet, reflective sorrow of Narcissus, a boy whose beauty was so perfect it became a curse, not because he sought admiration, but because he could not look away from the only face that ever truly held his gaze. His story, like so many in Greek myth, is not one of loud punishments or divine fire, but of slow isolation, of longing unanswered, and of a soul quietly folding in on itself. And somewhere, echoing in the background, another voice lingers, soft, fading, and forever incomplete. The voice of Echo, who loved him and was never heard. There was once a boy, born in a quiet grove and raised by the river's edge, whose beauty was unmatched by anything around him. Narcissus was his name, and he grew not like a warrior, not like a god, but like something sculpted from light and shadow, shaped by still water and soft winds. His hair was like dark threads of night, His eyes held the calmness of a hidden lake, and his voice, though rarely used, was gentle, low, and steady. Wherever he walked, the world leaned toward him. Flowers bent slightly in his path. Birds quieted their songs. And yet, he walked alone. People loved him, but he never seemed to notice. Men and women both found themselves drawn to him, but he was not cruel. He did not mock them. He simply did not feel what they felt. It was as though his heart had never been stirred from its sleep. He lived quietly, without ambition or need for praise. He had no hunger to conquer or rule, but still, the gods were watching. Far off in the woods, there lived a nymph named Echo, whose name was more than just a word. It was her fate. Once, long ago, she had angered the goddess Hera by speaking too much, distracting her with clever stories while Zeus slipped away unseen. As punishment, Hera took her voice, not entirely, but mostly. From that day on, Echo could no longer speak her thoughts freely. She could only repeat the last words spoken to her, like a ghost of conversation, always following but never leading. And so she lived in the shadows of the hills, among moss and trees, speaking only in fragments, her thoughts never fully her own. And one day, she saw Narcissus. He was walking beside the river, not hunting or gathering, just stepping through the grass as though he were part of the land itself. Echo watched from behind a tree, her heart swelling with something too big to hold. She followed, quietly, until she could no longer keep her presence hidden. A twig snapped beneath her foot. Narcissus turned. He called out, "Who's there?" Echo's lips parted. "There," she repeated, softly. He frowned, stepped closer. "Come to me." "Me," she whispered. And when he finally saw her, she stepped out from the trees, with hands shaking, eyes wide, hoping, but he turned away. "I would rather die," he said, "than love someone who cannot even speak." "Speak," Echo said, and then again, "someone, love." But it was no use. He had already walked away, and Echo, heart cracked open in silence, faded slowly into the forest, until only her voice remained, just echoes. No body, no touch, no tears, only the last word spoken, tossed back like a pebble skipping across still water. And Narcissus, he continued walking. He did not feel guilt. He did not feel pride. He felt nothing at all, only the stillness of his own company. And perhaps the gods, or the earth, or some spirit watched this boy, untouched by others, and wondered what he truly saw when he looked out at the world. One day, tired from his journey, Narcissus came upon a pool of water, more still and clear than any he had ever seen. It lay tucked beneath low trees, its surface undisturbed by wind or insect. He leaned over it, perhaps to drink, perhaps to cool his face, and then he saw it, a face looking back, eyes like his, lips like his, a quiet beauty that mirrored his own perfectly. He paused, smiled, reached forward, but the surface rippled and the image broke. He waited, it returned. He sat there for hours, watching the face in the water. He tried to speak, but the reflection said nothing. He whispered, smiled, tilted his head, and the face copied him. He reached again, and again the image vanished. And each time, his hunger for it grew deeper. He did not realize it was his own face. To him, it was another, a presence just beyond touch, a being who loved him in perfect silence. He could not leave. He no longer ate. He no longer moved. He watched until his body grew still like the water. And then he faded. Some say the gods turned him into a flower, small, white, with a golden center. The narcissus, which still blooms near quiet streams and bends gently toward its own reflection. Others say he simply disappeared, and only the water remembers. Echo still lingers near those pools, speaking softly to those who call out. Her voice is not her own, but it remains, repeating what others say, hoping one day someone might say something worth holding on to. Narcissus was not vain. He did not love himself out of arrogance. He simply loved the only face that ever looked at him with such stillness, such peace. And perhaps that is the saddest part, that he fell in love not with who he was, but with the idea of being loved. Let your thoughts drift now, not upward, not outward, but inward, into quiet pools and soft forests, into the gentle echoes that live in silence. You do not have to speak. You do not have to be seen. You are already enough. The water is still. The voice is quiet. Sleep now. The reflection will wait. The story of Persephone and the underworld, a calming, immersive sleep myth in long paragraph style. There was a time when the world was always blooming, when the rivers did not freeze, and the leaves did not fall, and the soft green of spring stretched endlessly across the hills. This was the world before winter, a time when flowers opened early and lingered long, and the wheat rose without fear of frost. And at the center of this golden season stood a girl, not yet a woman, who walked with bare feet over soft grass, laughter rising like birdsong behind her. Her name was Persephone, and though many would later call her queen of the underworld, she was, in the beginning, simply a daughter of earth and sky. She was born of Demeter, goddess of the harvest, the one who shaped the grain, who walked the fields with golden arms and hair like ripened corn. Demeter was not cold or distant, like the Olympian gods who sat in marble palaces and hurled thunder from thrones. She was tender, nurturing, a goddess of growing things, of bread, of barley, of all the quiet things that made human life possible. And she loved her daughter not with detachment, but with fierce, protective warmth. Persephone, in turn, loved the wide meadows, the scattered petals of crocus and narcissus, the gentle hum of bees near blooming clover. She had no need of temples. Her altar was the earth itself. The gods watched her from afar. She was not a warrior. She carried no spear, no armor, but her presence was soft and luminous, like the first light of morning. Many admired her, some desired her, but Demeter kept her close, far from the ambitions of Olympus and the deep caverns of the world. She did not know that eyes from below had already found her. Hades, lord of the underworld, was not like his brothers. He did not throw bolts of lightning or whip the seas into foam. He ruled the realm beneath the earth, where the dead walked in silence and shadows moved without sound. His was a kingdom of stillness, of memory, of what could not be changed. He was not cruel, but he was lonely, and in the darkness of his palace, he began to feel the absence of sunlight, of color, of life. When he looked upon Persephone, he did not see a girl. He saw spring, and longed for her in a way he did not understand. The story, as it was later told, unfolded on a clear day. The grass was warm beneath Persephone's feet. Her friends, nymphs of the forest and stream, scattered through the meadow, gathering flowers in woven baskets. The sky arched blue and wide above them, and the breeze carried the perfume of lilies and wild thyme. Persephone reached toward a strange flower. Some say a narcissus, some say another bloom not found again since. And as her fingers touched its petals, the earth beneath her cracked. It was not a violent quake, not the roar of a collapsing mountain. It was a quiet, patient partying, a seam opening in the soil, and from that dark wound in the world rose a chariot, black as obsidian, pulled by horses with eyes like extinguished stars. Hades stood within it, solemn, silent, and before Persephone could cry out, the ground closed above her, sealing the sky away. She did not scream. The flower she had reached for lay alone on the surface. The meadow, once full of laughter, was still. Demeter felt the loss immediately. She did not need a message or a vision. She felt it in the soil, in the seeds that would no longer stir. She searched the world, her feet carrying her across continents, her eyes scanning every field and grove. She disguised herself, questioned travelers, pleaded with other gods. None would tell her where Persephone had gone, and so her sorrow became a silence across the world. Crops failed, winds turned cold. The once endless spring began to fray at the edges. Fruits withered on the vine. Animals wandered in confusion. The rivers thinned, and people looked to the sky and found no answers. Demeter, in her grief, withdrew from the world she had once nurtured. Her temples were abandoned. Fires went out, and slowly the first winter came. Beneath the earth, Persephone did not find fire or torment. The underworld was not a place of shrieking souls and screaming flames. It was quiet, cold but not cruel, dim but not entirely dark. The walls of Hades' palace were not jagged or bloody. They were polished, smooth, carved with old runes and echoes of forgotten lives. The dead moved through it like mist, not weeping, but whispering. Persephone was not chained or dragged. Hades did not roar. He simply watched her. And though he had taken her, he did not strike her. He offered her a throne beside his own. At first, she would not eat. She would not speak. She wandered the halls in silence, her hands brushing across cold stone, her heart beating louder than the footsteps of the dead. But time, even beneath the earth, moves forward, and slowly something began to change. The stillness became less empty. The shadows softened. The ghosts seemed less frightening, and Hades, for all his power, began to appear not as a monster, but as a man, lonely, stern, gentle in unexpected ways. Persephone still missed the sky. She longed for the wind, for bees, for the sound of water rushing over stone. But something inside her, something quiet and curious, began to settle into this new rhythm. She sat on the throne, not out of obedience, but out of stillness. And one day, as Hades offered her a fruit, a single pomegranate, split open with seeds like garnets, she ate, not the whole fruit, just a few seeds, small, soft, sweet. She let the juice stain her lips, the taste unfamiliar and strange, and the earth changed again. Above, Demeter finally learned the truth. From Helios, the sun god, who sees all, from Hermes, the messenger, who had walked the paths to the underworld and returned. She went to Zeus, king of the gods, and demanded her daughter's return. And Zeus, who loved balance more than justice, sent Hermes to fetch Persephone. The chariot was summoned once more, and Persephone rose from the shadows, not as a girl, but as something new. She returned to her mother, and when they embraced, the world sighed in relief. The snow melted, the rivers filled, seeds stirred beneath the soil. But when Demeter asked if Persephone had eaten anything while below, the answer, soft and simple, brought silence. Yes, she had. And because she had tasted the food of the dead, she could not remain above forever. The rule was old, older than Zeus, older than Olympus itself. Those who eat in the land of the dead must return to it. And so a compromise was shaped, a rhythm, a pattern. For part of the year, spring and summer, Persephone would return to the earth, walk the meadows, laugh in the wind, and the land would bloom with her. But for the other part, autumn and winter, she would return to the underworld, and with her descent, the world would fade into cold and quiet. She became two things, not only daughter of the harvest, but queen of the dead. When Persephone first emerged from the underworld, it was not with fanfare or a thunderous roar from the heavens. There was no chariot of fire, no trumpet of triumph. It was gentler than that, the slow softening of the earth's breath, the quiet thawing of frozen roots, the trembling stir of a flower bud rising from cold soil. The trees felt it first, then the rivers, then the birds returned, not in flocks, but as single notes of song. And somewhere far below, the shadows withdrew, not out of fear, but as one part of her released her back into the light. Demeter, who had waited in sorrow and silence, felt her daughter's presence before she saw her. It was in the wind, in the weight of the sunlight, in the scent of olive groves blooming again after months of barren sleep. When Persephone stepped onto the earth, the grass reached up to meet her. The sky opened like a book, remembered after years in darkness. And in that reunion, two arms wrapped tightly around each other, mother and daughter, with nothing between them but breath. The seasons shifted, not just because she had returned, but because the world itself remembered how to grow again. But she was not the same girl who had disappeared among the flowers. The time below had changed her. She did not weep the way she once did. She did not rush into fields with the same weightlessness. There was a silence behind her eyes, not a void, but a depth, as though she had walked so far into the dark that she now carried a piece of it inside her, as if she could somehow hold back time, keep her from returning again. But even a goddess cannot stop the pull of the old laws. Persephone had eaten the seeds. Her body knew the rhythm now. A clock had been planted deep within her, not one made of metal or numbers, but of roots and echoes and ancient laws. Each year, when the days grew long and warm, Persephone would rise, and with her came green leaves, gentle rains, wheat tall and golden, the hum of bees, the sound of laughter in orchards. She was no longer only the daughter of Demeter. She was now the bringer of spring, the breath of the world's awakening. She walked through the fields not as a child, but as something sacred, something earned. But as the year wore on, as the first leaves began to shift in color, as the wind changed from soft to sharp, Persephone would feel it, a tug behind her ribs, low and constant, like the memory of music long since stopped. It was not dread, that the time was near to descend once again, that the underworld waited, not with chains or fire, but with stillness and her throne of dark stone. Demeter would weep every year. She would beg the world to stop spinning. She would clutch the earth, rake her fingers through the dirt. And then, when Persephone had gone, she would fall silent again, like the sea pulling in and out, like breath, like sleep. Down below, Hades waited. He did not pace, he did not command, he simply made space, a place beside him, a realm prepared. And when Persephone returned, when the last leaf fell and the last harvest was taken in, she did not come as a prisoner. She stepped down like someone entering their second home. Her hands trailed the stone walls like one who remembers their path. And the dead greeted her not with fear, but with reverence. She was not only queen in name, she had grown into the role, season by season, like a tree whose roots deepen each year. There is something comforting in this cycle, not tragic, but truthful, that even the most vibrant living things must sometimes sleep, that joy must pause to breathe. Persephone did not break under this rhythm. She did not resist it. She learned to walk between two worlds, one of blooming life, one of still shadows, and found balance between them. She was not torn, she was not lost, she was becoming. She listened to their stories, not all of sorrow, not all of regret, but stories of longing, of love, of moments that mattered. She sat with widows, with poets, with warriors who still whispered the names of their children. She did not rule with fire or command. She ruled with attention, with presence. And in that place, where so little ever changed, her presence was like a breeze that stirred the curtains of eternity. The other gods rarely visited her there. They preferred the brightness of Olympus, the golden halls, the banquets and quarrels. But Persephone did not need their approval. Her throne was carved with the names of the forgotten. Her crown was woven not of gold, but of asphodel, of night-blooming flowers, of the soft things that grow where nothing else dares to root. She was not the kind of queen who needed to shout. Her silence was its own law, and Hades, for all his dark reputation, never sought to bind her again. He had what he wished for, not her presence, but her choice, and in choosing, she became more than any one story could contain. Not just a maiden stolen, nor just a goddess crowned. She was a cycle, a mystery, a bridge. Above, poets began to speak of her in new ways. She was no longer just the weeping daughter. She became the embodiment of seasons, of transition, of transformation. Temples rose in her name, not just beside those of Demeter, but in places of quiet beauty, in groves, in caves, along the places where spring first touched the land after long winters. People lit candles not only in prayer, but in thanks, for she had taught the world something older than the gods, that death is not always the end, that after the silence there can still be song. And so the myth endured, not with fury, but with gentleness. Farmers would whisper her name in early spring, when the soil began to warm beneath their feet. Mothers told her story to their daughters, not as a warning, but as a lesson about strength, about change, about the beauty of returning. And the earth remembered. Year after year, bloom after bloom, snow after snow, time passed differently in the underworld. Not slower or faster, but deeper. It moved like a river flowing beneath stone, steady, hidden, eternal, while on the surface the sun arched across the sky, and the months turned like pages in a book below. In the cool halls of Hades' realm, time did not announce itself with dawns or dusk. Instead, it gathered in quiet corners, in the dust that clung to marble statues, in the soft footfalls of the dead walking endlessly along shadowed paths. Persephone moved through this realm not as an outsider anymore, but as one who knew its every silence. Her footsteps did not echo, her presence did not disturb. She had become part of it, not in defeat, but in understanding. She did not weep for the spring when she was underground, because she knew it would come again. And that was the lesson she carried, season after season. That grief was not permanent, that cold was not forever, that even in places where nothing grows, beauty can still exist. She planted small things in hidden corners, seeds of memory, fragments of laughter from her time above. She spoke to the dead with kindness, listening not to what they had lost, but to what they had loved. Her court was quiet, and her rule was soft, like snow blanketing the world before spring's return. She did not command with fear. She reigned with stillness, and Hades watched. He had taken her once, yes, and for that, the myths remember him with suspicion, with darkness, with shadows that seem to stain every tale that bears his name. But in the long winters that followed, he came to understand her, not as a prize, not as something stolen, but as someone he could never possess. He did not try to keep her chained. He learned to wait, to create a space for her, not a prison, but a sanctuary. And when she returned each autumn, she did so by choice. She did not run into his arms, nor shrink from his presence. She entered the halls like someone who had come home to a different kind of home, one made not of laughter and sunlight, but of quiet purpose. Their relationship was not like others told in myth, not full of storms or jealous rages. It was not fiery, it was not cold, it was something subtler, like two stones resting beside one another at the bottom of a stream, solid, unmoving, shaped by the same current. They rarely touched, and when they did, it was not dramatic. A glance, a hand brushing another in passing, a shared silence as they watched the dead pass by. And in that stillness, something sacred grew. Not passion, but presence. Persephone became a goddess, not through battle or trial, but through the soft practice of returning. Each year, she climbed upward again, and each year she descended, and with each movement she deepened. She was no longer torn between two identities. She was both at once, not divided, but doubled. Above, she walked through golden fields, scattering seeds and laughter, her hair warmed by sunlight. Below, she moved like breath through still air, her fingers trailing across old bones and forgotten names. She became the hinge between life and death, the breath that stands between inhale and exhale. And because of her, the world turned. Spring was not just a season, it was a reunion. When she stepped onto the earth again, flowers bloomed because they knew her footsteps. The grass leaned toward her. The trees opened their buds like sleepy eyes. People did not always know why their hearts felt lighter, only that they did. Somewhere beneath the soil, something had returned. Hope, perhaps, warmth, or maybe just the quiet assurance that even after absence, there could be presence once more. She was not the same as other gods. Zeus ruled with thunder, Poseidon with storms, Hera with pride, Athena with wisdom sharp as a blade. But Persephone ruled with something else entirely, the soft, cyclical certainty of return. She did not force change, she allowed it, she made space for it. And because of her, the world learned that even the most painful absences are not the end of the story. Children were taught her name, not only with reverence, but with comfort. In some villages, small festivals were held in her honor as winter ended. Quiet gatherings with seeds scattered into earth, hands washed in spring water, offerings of bread left beneath trees. She was not feared, she was not forgotten. She was remembered in the turning of the seasons, in the softness of petals, in the hush of snow, and in the hush that followed grief. There were some who prayed to her in sorrow, those who had lost someone and did not know how to move forward, and in their prayers, Persephone listened, not with promises to undo loss, but with the presence of one who understood it. She offered not a solution, but a hand to hold in the dark. She reminded them, gently, patiently, that spring always follows winter, that the pain would one day soften, that the world would bloom again, even if it took time. And so, season after season, the cycle continued. Above, Demeter waited each year with open arms, her eyes always on the horizon, scanning for the moment when the shadows would lift and her daughter would rise again. Their embrace never grew old. Each time they reunited, it was as if the earth breathed in after a long, patient exhale. Grain returned to the fields. Bees hummed between open blossoms. The sun lingered a little longer in the sky, and all around, life stretched upward in gentle celebration. But even as the world warmed, Persephone carried something with her, the memory of the quiet realm below. She did not speak of it often, but it shaped the way she moved, the way she looked at things. She did not fear death. She did not resist change. And this gave her a strength few others understood. Her joy was not the joy of someone who had never suffered. It was the joy of someone who had walked through silence and returned with music. Her smiles were softer, her words more weighted, and though she danced through wildflowers, she always left space for stillness, as though she knew the blooms would not last forever. And that was what made her sacred. She never clung to any season. She let them pass, one into the next, like pages in a book that had no final chapter. There were poets who said she walked barefoot everywhere, so the earth could feel her touch, that every time her heel pressed into the soil, it remembered her and responded. There were those who swore the crocus only bloomed because she breathed on it, that the breeze which stirred the first spring blossoms was her sigh, quiet and relieved to be among color again. But Persephone did not need statues or grand altars. She lived in moments, in seeds planted, in leaves falling, in footsteps returning. In time, the world came to understand that she was not just a goddess of spring, she was the goddess of becoming, of transition, of change. She held the boundary between light and dark, between past and future, between what was lost and what might grow again. She was, in her own quiet way, the heart of the world's rhythm, pulsing softly, steadily, season after season. And you, dear listener, lying quietly now with your breath slow and your thoughts softened by night, may feel her presence too, not as a myth far away, but as something near. In your own life, you have walked through seasons, you have known cold, you have known return, you have felt the ache of waiting and the relief of blooming once more. You are part of that rhythm, just as she is, so let the quiet come. Let your eyes drift closed like petals, folding in for the night. The wheel of the world continues turning gently beneath you. Spring will come, and winter will return, and you, like Persephone, will rise again. But for now, for this moment, there is only stillness and rest, and the soft rhythm of stories long remembered. Sleep. This is the story of Psyche and Eros, not a myth of war or vengeance, but of love quietly found, lost, and patiently earned again. A tale of trust, of longing, of soft footsteps in moonlit halls, and of the soul's journey toward understanding. The tale of Psyche and Eros, an immersive sleep myth written in gentle, flowing paragraphs. Long ago, in a land where the hills rolled softly like folded linen and rivers wandered gently between sleepy trees, there lived a girl named Psyche. Her name meant soul, and though she was born mortal, the people who saw her often forgot that simple truth. She was beautiful, not in the way of queens or jewels or loud celebrations, but in a quiet, impossible way. Her face held a calm so still, it seemed the wind hesitated before touching her. Her eyes reflected a sorrow that did not yet exist. Her beauty was not joyful, It was overwhelming. She had two sisters, also lovely in their own ways, but it was Psyche whom the people adored. They built shrines to her. They stopped praying to Aphrodite, the goddess of beauty and love, and instead turned their offerings toward this mortal girl. Songs were written, dances performed. Men traveled from far cities just to look upon her, and all the while Psyche stood in silence, a smile never quite reaching her lips, her gaze always focused on something just beyond the horizon, as though she were waiting for a truth that had not yet arrived. Far above, in the gleaming heights of Olympus, Aphrodite watched, not with admiration, but with quiet fury. The goddess, radiant and powerful, was used to being worshipped, praised, desired. She was the source of passion, of longing, of the soft aching of hearts. But now, altars once dressed with rose petals and honey were bare. Her name was still whispered, but always in comparison. She is beautiful, yes, the people said, but have you seen Psyche? And so Aphrodite, with her pride wounded and her presence fading, decided that the girl must be punished, but not with thunder, not with fire, with love. She called for her son, Eros, the god of love, sometimes called Cupid, though his wings were not childish and his bow not harmless. He was a quiet god, more mischief than malice, but his arrows were no game. One prick, and the heart would turn, helpless and true, toward whatever eyes it met next. Aphrodite told him, "Go to her. Make her fall in love with a monster. Let her beauty ruin her life." And Eros, obedient, descended. But when he reached Psyche, when he saw her standing alone, eyes downcast, untouched by joy, despite all her praise, something shifted. He lifted his bow, drew back the string, and hesitated. And in that pause, something eternal happened. The arrow slipped. It grazed his own skin, and the god of love, who had made countless others fall, fell quietly, completely, hopelessly in love with her. He could not punish her, but he could not reveal himself either. And so, he wove a plan, strange, gentle, full of shadows and silence. Back in her home, Psyche's beauty became a curse. No man dared ask for her hand. They admired her, but feared her. Her sisters married, and she remained alone. Her father, desperate, went to the oracle of Apollo, begging for guidance. And the oracle, perhaps nudged by divine hands, delivered a prophecy that chilled the air. "Take her to a high cliff," it said, "dressed as for a wedding, and leave her there. Her husband is not mortal. He waits for her. He is no man, but a monster, feared even by the gods." And so, one morning, Psyche was led to the cliff. She wore white. Her hands did not shake. Her eyes were dry. She did not cry out or beg. She simply stood, as if she had always known that this was where the story would turn. And when her family stepped back, and the wind rose around her like a soft cloak, she closed her eyes and fell. But the fall did not end in pain. The air caught her, lifted her gently. Invisible hands cradled her as she drifted downward, not toward rock, but toward roses. She awoke in a valley that did not appear on any map, a place where the grass shimmered, where the air smelled of honey and sleep, where fountains sang softly and the sky stayed always in a golden hush. A palace stood nearby, not grand in size, but full of beauty and light. Its walls glowed as though lit from within. And there, she was told, was her husband. She never saw him by day. He came only at night, silent, kind, his touch warm and careful. His voice, when he spoke, was gentle and low, the kind that settled into the bones. He told her only this: "You are safe. you are loved, but you must never look upon my face." And Psyche, though curious, obeyed. She wandered the gardens by day, surrounded by music, by invisible hands that cared for her every need. At night, he came to her, and slowly, something soft unfolded. Not lust, not madness, but love. Real, deep, strange love. The kind that grows in silence. The kind that holds you without needing to be seen. The days passed like drifting petals, and Psyche, though surrounded by beauty, began to feel something hollow settle beneath her contentment. Not unhappiness, not sorrow, but a quiet, aching need to know. She had lived with this mysterious, unseen husband for what felt like seasons. He had given her comfort, safety, and affection. He had whispered kindness into the dark, but she had never seen his face. She did not know his name. And though her days were peaceful, she could not shake the feeling that her life was incomplete, that without truly knowing who lay beside her each night, her heart could not rest fully, even in the gentlest of dreams. She missed her family, her sisters, the sound of voices that remembered her childhood, the way laughter used to rise around the table at sunset. She longed not for grandeur, but for grounding, the soft weight of a sister's touch, the comfort of familiar eyes. She asked her unseen husband if she could see them, and though his voice was steady, there was hesitation in it. "They will not understand," he said. "They will plant doubt in your heart." But still, he agreed. And so the next day, her sisters were brought to the valley by the same invisible winds that had once carried Psyche. When they saw the palace, the marble that sang in the sun, the roses that bloomed without care, the perfection of a life untouched by hardship, their wonder turned quickly into envy. They asked her questions, they laughed and smiled. But behind their smiles, their eyes glittered with unease. And when Psyche told them about her husband, how kind he was, how gentle, how loving, but also that she had never seen him, they leaned closer, their voices quiet and poisonous. "How can you love what you do not know?" one said. "How can you trust someone who hides from you?" said the other. "What if he is not a man at all?" they whispered. "What if he is a beast, a serpent, who waits until your guard is down to devour you?" Psyche laughed at first, shook her head, but their words clung to her like cold wind after warmth. They planted seeds, not of hate, but of fear, the kind that grows in the silence between questions. And that night, as her husband returned to her bed, as his arms wrapped around her in the dark, she felt the weight of unknowing settle between them. She could not sleep, her heart beat too loud. And so, while he lay breathing softly beside her, Psyche rose from the bed and took a lamp into her hand. She lit it with trembling fingers, shielding the flame with her palm. She held a dagger, too, given by her sisters, meant to protect her in case the terrible thing in her bed was truly a monster. But when she turned the flame toward him, when the light fell across his skin, her breath caught. He was not a beast. He was Eros, the god of love, golden-haired, with wings that shimmered faintly in the glow. His face peaceful in sleep, his body shaped like quiet poetry, his brow unfurrowed as though no pain had ever touched him. And Psyche, in that moment, saw not only beauty, but vulnerability, a god who had hidden himself not out of cruelty, but out of fear. Fear that he would not be loved for who he was, that trust could only be earned in darkness. Her hand shook, the lamp trembled, and a single drop of oil spilled. It fell on his shoulder, hot and sharp. He woke with a cry, his eyes wide, full of hurt. "You looked," he whispered, "not angry, not cruel, just broken, you doubted. And before she could speak, he was gone. The palace crumbled around her. The gardens faded. The sky above her turned dull and gray. And Psyche stood alone in a field, bare and cold, her breath visible in the morning chill. She had lost him, not because she had failed to love him, but because she had failed to trust him. The ache of it was deeper than anything she had ever known. Her beauty, once praised by cities, now brought her no comfort. Her name, once spoken like a hymn, now seemed like an echo from a world that had vanished. But Psyche was not a girl to fall and never rise again. She made a decision, not loud, not desperate, but quiet and clear. She would find him, no matter how far she had to go, no matter what it cost. She would face the gods if she had to. She would prove herself, not to win him back, but to become someone who could love without fear. And so she walked across forests, across rivers, up mountains and through valleys where only the wind whispered. She asked the gods for help, and most turned her away, but not all. At last, she reached the golden halls of Aphrodite herself. The goddess, still bitter, greeted her not with kindness, but with challenge. "You want to prove your love?" she said. "Then prove it, earn it." She gave Psyche 4 tasks, each one impossible, each one designed to break her. And Psyche, though afraid, accepted them all. Psyche stood before Aphrodite, the goddess whose beauty had once been unmatched, who now looked at the mortal girl with eyes not full of admiration, but with the cool amusement of someone preparing to watch a fragile thing break. The air in Aphrodite's chamber was heavy with the scent of rose oil and distant ocean wind, the walls covered in veils and mirrors, the floor so polished that it reflected the sorrow in Psyche's eyes like still water. But Psyche did not flinch. She did not fall to her knees. She waited. Aphrodite stepped close and smiled, not kindly but sweetly, in the way one might smile before handing someone a threadbare rope over a chasm. "If you truly wish to earn back what you've lost," she said, her voice like perfume turning sour, "you must prove it. Love is not given, it is won. You made your choice when you brought the lamp to bed. Now, let your choices lead you onward." She clapped her hands once, and servants appeared with baskets, heavy, woven, filled with seeds of every kind: barley, lentils, poppy, millet, black beans, white beans, mustard, rye, sesame, wheat, thousands upon thousands of seeds, a mountain of them, each smaller than the last. And then, with a single finger, Aphrodite overturned them onto the palace floor. The seeds scattered like dust across the polished marble. They rolled into corners, mingled, buried themselves beneath one another. "By nightfall," said Aphrodite, "you will sort them, each into its own pile. Every last one, or not at all." Then she left, her laughter drifting like silk behind her. Psyche looked down at the endless mess. The seeds shimmered in the light like a broken mosaic. Her hands shook slightly. There was no possible way to complete this task alone. But she did not cry. She knelt and began. Her fingers moved slowly, picking one grain at a time, placing it into a pile, then another, then another. Time passed without notice. The marble grew cold beneath her knees. Her hands grew cramped. She sorted by size, then by shape, but the piles slipped and merged again. Hours passed, and then something changed. A soft, fluttering sound, like cloth brushing stone. And then the tiniest buzzing, high and light, like flutes far away. She looked up and saw ants. thousands of them flowing from cracks in the floor, from the shadows of the pillars. Tiny creatures with legs like threads and backs that shimmered faintly in the golden light. They did not swarm her. They did not bite. They moved in silence, in harmony, in perfect rhythm. And together they began to sort, grain by grain, seed by seed. They worked in silence as she watched, too stunned to speak, her tears not from sorrow now, but from awe. She had not called them, she had not asked, but they had come. And by the time the sky outside the high window turned violet with night, the piles were neat, ordered, complete. Aphrodite returned, her arms crossed, expecting failure. But there they were, each seed in its own place. She said nothing, but her smile faltered. The next morning, Aphrodite handed Psyche a small basket made of woven gold thread and filled with soft, downy wool. "Take this," she said, "to the river that runs at the edge of the world. There you will find sheep, but not ordinary sheep. These are golden rams, with horns sharp as blades and tempers like fire. You will collect their fleece. Return with the golden wool before the sun sets, or not at all." She turned and vanished again, not waiting for a reply. And so Psyche walked and walked. The world grew quiet around her, the landscape shifting into stranger shapes the farther she went. Cliffs that breathed, trees with silver bark, grasses that sang when brushed by wind. And at last she reached the river. Its waters ran red, not with blood, but with some deeper shimmer, as though the current were made of molten garnet and shadowed wine. On the far side, she saw them, the golden rams, huge, wild, shining in the sunlight like burning coals. They paced the riverbanks, butted their horns against the rocks, lashed their hooves against the earth. Their eyes were wild, their teeth sharp. The air around them seemed to quiver with rage. Psyche stood frozen. There was no way to approach them. To step too close would mean being torn apart, and so she sat down and waited. The sun rose higher. The sheep grew restless, then drowsy, then still. When the heat of the day settled thick upon the land, the rams retreated to the shade, lying down in the reeds, their breaths slow, their bodies heavy. And then Psyche heard a whisper, not from within, not from a god, but from the river reeds themselves. They spoke softly, not with words, but with thought. "Wait," they told her, "until their anger sleeps. When they rest, go to the branches where they have brushed against the trees. There their golden fleece clings like spider silk. Gather only what is left behind." And so she did. She moved silently, gently. No hoof stirred, no horn turned her way. And when she returned to Aphrodite, the basket glowed with threads of purest gold. Another silence, another task passed, but the goddess had not yet finished. She led Psyche to a tower at the edge of a valley so deep it swallowed the sunlight. "This," she said, "is the spring of the Stygian River, the black stream that runs through the underworld. You must fetch a pitcher of its water, not from the stream above, but from where it boils up between death and darkness. The edge is guarded, the air is poison, the rocks are sharp. But if you fail, well, I suppose Eros was not worth it after all." And she was gone. Psyche stood at the cliff's edge, the wind tearing at her hair, the light thinning with every step she took downward. The path crumbled beneath her feet. Shadows clung to the rock faces. Vultures circled above, though they made no sound. The spring of the Styx lay far below, not a trickle, but a furious spout, guarded by serpents with eyes like broken mirrors and fangs the color of bone. She could not reach it. She knew that no mortal could, and yet, even in her despair, something ancient stirred in her heart. Not hope, but humility. She sank to her knees and prayed, not to Zeus, or to Aphrodite, or to any god she had ever heard named. She prayed simply, silently, to love itself, and in her hands, as if placed by some unseen presence, appeared a crystal vial sealed with wax, unbreakable by accident, and a voice, softer than breath, echoed through the stones. Climb no further, let the water rise. The river knows who you are. And from the cracks in the earth, a small stream bubbled up, black, shimmering, soft. It poured itself into the vial as if obeying her, and when it was full, the stream sank back into the stones without a sound. She returned to Aphrodite. Another silence, another past test. Now only one task remained, and this one, Psyche knew, was the hardest. Aphrodite gave her a small box, carved of ebony, tied with a golden thread. Take this, she said, to the realm below, the underworld. You will go to Persephone, queen of the dead. Ask her to place within this box a portion of her beauty. I need it. I have grown tired. The gods themselves avoided the underworld unless summoned, but she nodded and turned once more toward shadow. With the black box cradled in her arms, Psyche walked toward the edge of the world, not the end of maps, but the true edge, the place where even the gods tread lightly. The sky faded to gray as she passed into lands where nothing sang. She reached a valley of cold silence, where no birds flew, no rivers flowed, and the grass was brittle beneath her feet. This was the place where mortals did not return from, and yet she walked forward, not with boldness, but with calm. She remembered a tale whispered long ago in her father's house. There was no sign, no gate, no guard with a sword. Just a hollow in the rock, obscured by shadows, breathing out air that smelled of forgetfulness. She paused at its mouth, felt the weight of her own mortality pressing against her ribs. The walls wept with water that had never seen sunlight. The path sloped gently downward, and as she descended, sound faded from her. No footstep echoed, no breath stirred the dust. She passed souls who did not speak, only watched. Some floated, some drifted through archways. None reached for her, and sat quietly as the vessel moved across the current like a dream slipping from memory. Beyond the river, the shadows grew deeper. She crossed bridges made of bone and halls lined with columns that stretched into darkness. And then she reached the palace. Persephone sat on a throne of jet and silver. Her eyes were calm, not cold, but still. She was not the queen of punishment. She was the queen of what waits. She wishes for a portion of your beauty to be placed in this box. Persephone did not question. She did not judge. She simply nodded once, reached out her hand, and pressed her palm over the box. A light pulsed faintly through the gold thread, and then was still. Go now, she said, but do not look back. The same river, the same mist, the same soft silence. But as she rose from the shadows and stepped once more into the light of the living world, something changed. She was so close now. She held the box in her hands, not heavy, not loud, but she felt something stir inside her. Something small and deep and sharp. A thought. She had walked through the land of the dead. She had passed for impossible trials. She had faced gods. She had bent the rules of the world. She was tired. Her body ached. Her skin was dry. Her eyes hollow. And Aphrodite. Beautiful, eternal Aphrodite. had asked for this beauty inside the box. What if Psyche opened it? What if she took just a little, just a touch, not to be vain, not to be cruel, but to be enough, to be worthy, to look into Eros's eyes once more and see not doubt, but admiration. Her fingers moved slowly, the thread untied with a whisper. The lid opened like a sigh, and from within, nothing, or rather, something darker than nothing. It was not beauty inside, it was sleep, not rest, not dreams, but the deep, eternal sleep of forgetting. A shadow coiled up from the box, soft and heavy. It wrapped around her before she could scream, and Psyche collapsed. The box slipped from her fingers. She lay still on the path, eyes closed, her breath shallow and slow, not dead, but not awake. Trapped in the quiet she had braved so much to leave behind. But love does not vanish, not when it is true, not when it has grown through pain. And far away in Olympus, Eros stirred. He had recovered from the wound she had given him. He had waited, he had watched, and he had wept, not as gods often weep with thunder and storm, but silently, with the ache of something lost too soon. When he heard what she had done, when he saw her lying still upon the earth, he did not pause. He flew, not with golden arrows or fiery vengeance. He flew with open arms and hollow lungs, his wings slicing through clouds, his eyes fixed on the place where she had fallen. He found her on the path between death and life. He knelt beside her and touched her cheek. "Beloved," he whispered, "you are enough." He pressed his lips to her mouth, not with hunger, but with hope. And from that kiss, a warmth spread, the shadow retreated, the sleep unwound. Her eyes fluttered open, and there he was, not hidden, not silent, but real, and hers. They held each other in the silence of the hills. No words needed, no vows spoken, and together they rose. They went to Zeus, who listened not with anger, but with understanding. He gave Psyche a drink from a golden cup, a sip of ambrosia, the nectar of gods. And she was no longer mortal. She would age no more. She would fade no more. She would walk with Eros, not for a season, but forever. A soul made divine by the path she walked, by the love she did not abandon, by the pain she endured, and the trust she reclaimed. Their daughter was born of this love. Her name was Hedon, or pleasure, a being of joy, of sweetness, of all the light things that follow after struggle. And Psyche, whose name meant soul, became one of the most beloved figures in all the myths. Not because she was a warrior, not because she conquered, but because she endured, because she doubted and still returned, because she fell and still rose. Her story was whispered for generations, a tale of quiet bravery, of love reborn, of the soul's long walk through shadow toward something true. And now, dear listener, as you lie in your quiet space, let this story settle into your breath. You may rest now, knowing that even when you doubt, even when you fall, even when the path is dark and long, the light waits, love waits, and sleep, the gentle kind, is here too. Close your eyes. The soul is not lost. The soul remembers, and all will be well. Their daughter was born of this love. Her name was Hedon, or pleasure, a being of joy, of sweetness, of all the light things that follow after struggle. And Psyche, whose name meant soul, became one of the most beloved figures in all the myths. Not because she was a warrior, not because she conquered, but because she endured, because she doubted and still returned, because she fell and still rose. Her story was whispered for generations. A tale of quiet bravery, of love reborn, of the soul's long walk through shadow toward something true. And now, dear listener, as you lie in your quiet space, let this story settle into your breath. You may rest now, knowing that even when you doubt, even when you fall, even when the path is dark and long, the light waits, love waits, and sleep, the gentle kind, is here too. Close your eyes. The soul is not lost. The soul remembers, and all will be well.